Like, it's not the planet or the economy. Rescuing the planet and protecting the environment can also be really good for the economy.
Word.
Hello, and welcome to the Politics Girl podcast. I'm your host, Lee McGowan. Let's get into it. Today's pod is a candid conversation with National Climate Advisor Ali Zaidi, who leads the White House Climate Policy Office. A longtime advisor to President Biden, Ali joined the Biden-Harris administration after serving as New York State's Deputy Secretary for Energy and Environment and Chairman of Climate Policy and Finance. A graduate of Harvard and Georgetown University, Ali has also worked as an adjunct professor at Stanford. Ali is the co-founder of Lawyers for a Sustainable Economy, helping sustainability-focused startups find pro bono legal services, and served in the Obama-Biden administration as an associate director for natural resources, energy, and science, and as deputy director of energy policy for the Domestic Policy Council. I'm having him on today because I think we need some good news. With all that's going on and January seeming to last about 3 years, I want to give you some insight into all the amazing things we have to look forward to as the climate initiatives included in the Inflation Reduction Act get underway. Despite what we hear, we really do have a competent, forward-thinking government looking out for our futures and our best interests. And I thought we should all know what we should be looking out for. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, longtime leader in climate policy development, legislation, and executive action, and White House National Climate Advisor, Ali Zaidi. Welcome, Ali.
Good to be here.
Thank you for joining me. I mean, we met for the first time when I was at the White House for the celebration of the Inflation Reduction Act. But before the formal ceremony, I had the privilege of being in the Roosevelt Room with you and a number of other people to talk about the bill and break down the different elements of it so we could better understand what was included. And I remember feeling so inspired with your team's kind of infectious energy and the excitement about what was in this bill and what could really be accomplished because of it. And everyone seemed rightfully proud of this piece of legislation, and it was a truly hopeful thing to witness.
You know, for the longest time, the story about climate change has been told as a story of gloom and doom. And you don't have to seek it out, right? It's the hurricanes that hit our coastlines. It's the fires that are burning through the West. We're in a record drought period. So the reality and the urgency and the severity of the climate crisis is here, right now. But I think for a lot of us, for now decades, we've been saying, look, tackling the climate crisis can actually be a story of opportunity and hope. And it's not every day that the folks who are out there agitating with the sort of optimistic take in the face of a crisis get vindicated. And I think part of what you felt, which I feel every day, is that through the Inflation Reduction Act, through the bipartisan infrastructure law, through the bold actions the president's taken, and that the Congress has supported him in doing so, we've actually vindicated the folks who on Fridays or other days decided to strike or march or get together, somehow find time in their days to show up and push this issue. Now we've got the tools to get the job done. And I think that's the powerful takeaway at this moment, is not just that, clean energy is going to get deployed, but that people engaging made a difference. And now they have the tools to bend the curve on a planetary scale crisis.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, the Inflation Reduction Act was actually signed into law in August 2022. And among other things, it set out to help the economy and deal with the control costs of things like, the pharmaceutical industry. It's going to do that, but it will also cut America's energy costs, create good jobs in the energy sectors. And it's going to transform the US's efforts to address this climate crisis that we're talking about. This bill is the single largest step Congress has ever taken to address climate change. And it includes a nearly $370 billion in investments to places like disadvantaged communities and prioritizing projects that will repurpose retired fossil fuel infrastructure and employ displaced workers from those industries. It'll put the U.S. back on track towards a fair, equitable, and economic clean energy transition. And I think that what people often forget And what President Biden has always said is that investing in green infrastructure, investing in our planet, being environmental, it can also be a moneymaker. Like, it's not the planet or the economy. Rescuing the planet and protecting the environment can also be really good for the economy.
Word. Yeah, no, totally. And let me double click on some of what you said. First, when you say it's a big step, I just want to put this in context, right? So when people hear it's a big step, they think, okay, normally, I traveled 2 feet on one stride. This time I moved 2 feet and like 4 more inches, right? Like, this is an incrementally big step. No, this is 10 times bigger than anything Congress has ever done, right? So this is not another step. It's like a massive leap forward in terms of our ability to get the job done. That's thing number one. Thing number two that you, I think, put your finger on is this is about, for folks who are like, maybe I'm not an environmentalist. Maybe I just don't have time to think about all this stuff that's going on. What I have to think about is what's at the kitchen table. How much is the gasoline bill going to be? How do we get our home energy costs in check? Give you 2 examples on that. The first is gasoline, right? So a lot of folks over the last 5-10 years have been looking at electric vehicles and thinking, gee, that's just not something I'm going to be able to afford. What's remarkable over the last 2 years, the number of models of electric vehicles has doubled under the Biden administration. The number of chargers on the road has doubled. And the deployment of electric vehicles annually has doubled. And now what's remarkable is you've got vehicles, not just one, but several under 30K new cars that are electric that are being sold into the marketplace. The average new vehicle is 40K, right? So for folks who are coming in sort of more in the lower end of the new car market, and for people who are buying those cars, you can now get $7,500 off the sticker price to knock that down. So if it's a $27,000 car, you only have to pay $20,000. That's a really big deal. And then there are a lot of folks who think, gee, I'm never going to be in the new car market, or not for a bunch of years am I going to be in the new car market. And what's amazing about this bill is that for the first time ever, we have a tax credit for used cars. So Secretary Pete, our Secretary of Transportation, who is awesome, he and Chasten went out, they bought a used EV for $14,000. If you go out, buy a used EV for $14,000, you actually get a $4,000 tax credit off the top, knocks it down to 10K. And now you're in a car that charges at the equivalent of $1 a gallon, right? That's how much electricity roughly costs. So, people look at, like, my folks, other people, they'll drive an extra mile or two just to get, 3-4 cents off the gallon, right? You look at Gas Buddy to do that. We're looking at an opportunity now to get people in vehicles that will dramatically drop how much they spend on that. Home heating costs 50%. 50% of the home energy bill is just heating and cooling costs. This bill includes a 30% tax credit, and for low and moderate income folks, a rebate to cover the full cost of shifting from natural gas-based heating to electric, which will slash your bills by hundreds of dollars a year. So that's, I think, a game changer for folks even who aren't dialed into this like environmental conversation. And then the last thing I'll touch on is, how are we doing this, right? It's like one thing to do the thing. It's another thing to do it the right way.
Right.
I remember about 10, 15 years ago, we used to talk about green jobs. And you go into a room, you're talking about green jobs, and people sort of look at you and they'd say, I don't want a green job. Like, I want a real job. I want a real job. And I think what's transformative is now jobs in clean energy aren't jobs on another planet. They're jobs as electricians, as welders, as auto workers, as steel workers. And what this legislation has done, because of the president's conviction, is made sure that the products that we are selling, I just talked about electric vehicles, talk about solar, heat pumps, that stuff's now going to be stamped made in America, which means factory floors across the country employing folks at good wages with good benefits So it's not just steel in the ground, it's steel in the spine of the American middle class. We are going through not only an industrial renaissance, we will go through a renaissance of the American middle class while tackling climate change, which is a pretty good deal.
It's a really good deal. And honestly, I think people should understand that, you guys have written into this bill a lot of things that make things come back to America, that make infrastructure come back. And there's some criticism that under the Inflation Reduction Act, some vehicles won't qualify for these EV tax credits because there's a line item that wants them to be made here in North America and the batteries to be made in North America and a certain percentage of the batteries to be made in North America. And, some people say, well, that's not fair. I want to buy my car from X, Y, or Z. And it's like, you have to start looking at it in a different way. Like, starting next year, no credit can be granted if a battery components are manufactured or assembled in what's called a foreign entity of concern. So starting in 2025, no tax credit will be granted for the vehicle battery contains critical materials that were extracted and processed or recycled in a foreign area of concern, like, say, China. And before people get all up in arms about that, I think we should see this as an amazing incentive to support American-made products and American jobs and American infrastructure, which even the most America First people and isolationists should be on board with, right? Because this bill sets us on a path, and a pretty quick path, because the timeline is very quick to roll this out, to stop investing in other countries as they wreck the environment and build things here, bring the jobs home to America, buy American or from American free trade partners. So we encourage countries to have good trade deals with us while we're creating new car plants, new battery manufacturing right here in the States, because ultimately we want to angle to be the world's leader in these green jobs that we're talking about and green technology. And that starts with doing it correctly here at home and then selling those products and our way of doing things to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I mean, look, the president through this legislation and the actions he's taken has turned America really into a magnet for private investment into these industries. We are, for the first time in decades, investing in our workers and in our communities to make this stuff here. And to your point, it's not a long-term, like, we'll see you in 10 years and talk about it conversation. Batteries. Let's take batteries, for example. Batteries were invented here. They were perfected at places like Argonne National Lab. And then all of the capacity to make these batteries popped up elsewhere, in China and elsewhere. Since the president's taken office, almost $100 billion of private capital, dozens of battery factories, including one that just recently went union in Ohio, are popping up to make that technology here in America for the first time. Solar manufacturing, solar panels. We came in, we had about 7 gigawatts of solar manufacturing capacity. By the end just of his first term, by 2024, we will have quadrupled that capacity. Enough solar panels will be manufactured every year in America to help 5 million homes worth of electricity go solar every year. That's a lot of solar panels being manufactured across the country. So this is, I think, a really big deal. And critical minerals are part of the equation, right? Do we want the input materials of this stuff to be sourced in a sustainable way with good practices, with engagement from communities? Do we want a strong emphasis on recycling and reuse of these materials? The answer has to be heck yeah. And the way we do that is by leading by example. And I think what we're seeing internationally is, I think of it as 3 phases. We walked in the door, we're out of the Paris Agreement, we've sidelined our workers in the global clean energy race. That's not a good look. Then we go to phase 2, where we sign ourselves back into the Paris Agreement and we say, look, we want to be in this race. And a lot of people look at us and they say, I don't know, will they follow through? Now what's happening is America is sprinting out into the frontier, and other folks are looking at it and they're hearing from CEOs who are telling them, point blank, CEOs will tell you, I could have made this factory somewhere else, but I decided to build this factory in America. And so others are now racing ahead as well. This is a good thing, a race to the top. This is what leading by example is all about. We're leading by example so that others will follow. And if we do that, the world will be a better place.
Absolutely. I mean, we can lead the world in innovation again. That would be great. We build and create new things. Now, it's only appropriate if we're talking about what's good for the planet we live on, that we take a minute to talk about what's good for the body we live in. Today's partner is Athletic Greens. Whether you've listened to this podcast before or this is your first time, I want you to understand what a fantastic product AG1 is. If you want better gut health, more energy, terrific sleep, or to support your immune system, you don't want to put together an entire list of supplements, then AG1 is the product for you. With 1 scoop in water on an empty stomach, you'll be absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients to start your day off right. I've tried a ton of different supplements over the years, but this one is just different, and the ingredients are so incredibly high quality. I've got everyone from my family and friends to my 80-year-old dad on it. I can't think of another daily routine that pays off as well as AG1, which is why I trust the product so much. So if you're looking for a simpler and more cost-effective supplement routine, Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/politicsgirl. That's athleticgreens.com/politicsgirl. Check it out. You won't be disappointed. Now, a lot of the bill and a lot of the changes that you guys want to make is built around the concept of tax credits, clean electricity tax credits. And the idea is for companies to become technology neutral by 2025. And we're already in 2023. So the idea, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to drive the expansion of these industries to a kind of zero carbon electricity sources like wind, drive them towards solar, drive them towards geothermal, nuclear, with tax credits without preferring one over the other, right? And also to include help there for existing nuclear plants and places that store electricity that we could make. Is that correct? Is that a good assessment of what you're trying to do?
We cannot afford to be losing clean sources of power when we are in the race for our lives to save the planet, right? Math doesn't add up. So take, for example, I'm from Pennsylvania, Southwest PA. There are a couple nuclear plants that have been marginal economics. They've been struggling to get by because of the incentives that we've passed through the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure law. Those plants are going to stay online.
Right.
That's a lot of solar would have had to be built just to catch up if they went away, right? So now we're back in the race. And then I think from a new sources of power perspective, we're seeing unprecedented expansion of solar and wind. And wind, like you wouldn't know it, right? So for a long time, we've been building wind on the prairies and the plains, right? But now we are, in this administration, not a concept. Steel is going into the water and construction is underway for offshore wind built on the East Coast. And soon we'll be doing the same thing on the West Coast. And by the way, the supply chain for offshore wind extends to all 50 states. So this is not a coastal upside. This is everybody's winning. And I think the technology neutral thing is not just for the electricity sector, right? For even the cars. So you can make this fuel called clean hydrogen by essentially taking the power from, let's say, a solar panel, running it through water. And it separates the oxygen molecules and the hydrogen molecules. You grab the hydrogen molecules from water and you can run your car on that, right? That's clean hydrogen. Our tax credits for clean vehicles, you can either go get an electric vehicle or you could go get a hydrogen vehicle. We're not biased about the solution. We are biased about the outcome. And the outcome is greater energy security, stronger American economic position, and the solutions we need to tackle the climate crisis.
Sure. And also the act provides, I believe what you guys are calling the first ever 10-year runway for energy incentives. And I know this is a really big deal. And I would say in regular people speak, that would be that you're extending these tax credits at their full value for at least 10 years. So that gives investors, manufacturers, utilities, developers enough time and confidence in the economic feasibility of clean energy choices to plan and build new manufacturing facilities, these offshore wind machines, that kind of thing, well into the 2030s. So basically you're saying people don't need to be afraid to make these changes or build these new structures within their industries because they know they're going to have this government funding secured through these tax credits for at least a decade. Is that right?
Yeah, look, I mean, we're asking folks to take risk, right? We're saying, hey, make an investment that involves risk. Put your capital on the line, bet on America, bet on our workers, and it will pan out. And that doesn't work if the partnership, you're sort of dodgy on your side of the partnership, right? If you said, look, I'm going to pay you to run a marathon, 26 miles, but I'll let you know later if I'll keep paying you after the first 5 miles. That's like a weird thing to say to somebody, right? Like, you are either their partner through all the 26 miles or you're not. And we are in a race in the decisive decade for climate action, right? That's what the science tells us. This is our decade to get it right. In this decisive decade, we've got to be a predictable partner through the entire race if we want folks to bet on America, American ingenuity, American workers, American communities. And that's what the Biden administration has passed legislation to do. We will be the steady partner every step of the way, all 26 miles.
That makes perfect sense. So how does that work if, God forbid, the Republicans took over the government? Would those tax credits be taken away? Or if the Republicans returned to power, would they be able to just reverse all the good work you've done? Because it would be such a shame to say we're doing all these great new things. We're going into the future. We're going to make, we're going to be the leaders in green technology and then have it all be reversed so we can continue trashing our planet for big oil. Is that why we need to keep Democrats in office, or are you guys securing it no matter what happens?
Look, I don't think it's about Democrats or Republicans. I think what it's about is, do we have folks in the White House, in both chambers of Congress, who are committed to getting the job done on climate, on clean energy, on American manufacturing, on making it here in America? And I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't matter who's in there, right? If folks
good, I'm glad, because we shouldn't.
If folks are in Congress committed to the proposition that we're going to cede the clean energy race to other countries, if folks in Congress are committed to the proposition that we are going to develop an economic and tax framework that benefits to the wealthy and well-connected, but not to the breadth of the American middle class and those who seek to be in it, then that's going to be a problem. Tax policy and legislation are great because you can't, with just a stroke of a pen, repeal them. But Congress has within its power to go the wrong way. And we're fortunate, I think, to have at least leadership in the United States Senate and in the White House that's very committed to staying the course here. But policy matters in real life.
Yeah, I think people forget that.
Around. Yeah, it's like, I appreciate that in Washington, it's very easy to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act as the IRA, as just a bill, but there is an IRL and in real life component to all of this stuff, right? And in real life, it matters whether we have tax credits that encourage companies to invest in American manufacturing rather than outsourcing. And we have that tax code now, and we got to fight to protect it. And part of fighting to protect it is to make sure everyone understands how they can benefit from the policy structure that we set up. And that's why implementation matters so much. We've got to take advantage of the tools that we have now.
Yeah. And you have to show it working. You say, look, there are new companies coming. There are new jobs coming back here. We are building this now that we would have normally built in China or India or wherever. Plus, and I think this is something that I find very fascinating and very smart and forward thinking of you, the Inflation Reduction Act provides an enhanced electricity investment tax credit for projects that are built in communities where coal was an economic driver, or in disadvantaged communities where the unemployment rate is at or above the national average. So you guys have written into this bill a way to help communities who have been dependent on things like coal, or who already have high unemployment rates. So the administration had what I would say the foresight to try and make this transition between what we would call dirty energy and clean energy into more lucrative and more appealing for people and the communities involved to help Americans evolve to a new energy source. It's not only good for the environment and good for the planet, but good for their bottom line too, because there's a reason people stuck with coal. And A, it's because the owners make a ton of money, but B, so did the workers. They did well working in coal plants. It wasn't great for their health, but the money was terrific. And to say, well, we're just going to stop coal now, it's no wonder people are like, our family's been in coal for forever. You can't just take that away. So this idea that we don't want to just take your industry, we're giving you a quality alternative in the process, I think really speaks to more of America than just, me tree-hugging liberal types.
Yeah, look, you get 1/3 more tax credit. So let's say you're building a $100 million solar farm, you get $10 million more of a tax credit if you're building in a energy community. And there are a bunch of reasons why this is the right thing to do. Number one is the fairness point, right? These are folks who have put decades of blood, sweat, and tears into powering us through the industrial age.
Yeah.
We can't turn our backs on them. That's thing number one. Thing number two is the literal assets that we need to succeed in clean energy exist in this community, right? You got trained workers, you've got existing power sector and grid infrastructure, you got good, usually transportation infrastructure around that region. So there's no reason to go to a green field somewhere else and start brand new when you've got existing assets you can re-leverage. And then part of the assets we have are the human capital. We've got workers who are trained up and ready to go. And, one of the things the president, he'll push us on this every time we meet, is this is not about telling somebody, hey, you've been in energy for your entire career and you've lived in, call it Northwest Pennsylvania, where I'm from. And now I got a job for you in, web design 500 miles away. That's not the job they want.
Yeah.
So I think what we have an opportunity here with is to say, you can stay where you are, continue to sustain and support the community and quality of life you have at a wage that will allow you to do it with benefits and hopefully with worker power.
Yeah. I think that's great. And it's not just about incentivizing industry. It's exactly like you said before. It's also about encouraging American citizens to do their part and providing them direct incentives to do things like decarbonize their home or convert their furnaces or change their water heaters to heat pumps or do things like installing rooftop solar or retrofitting our houses so they're more energy efficient. Because ultimately, we have to play our part and industry has to play our part. It's a whole, like you said, this is the decisive decade, right? This is the time to do it. And you guys are giving both what I would say are tax credits in some cases and actual direct payments, like the $7,500 you were talking about for new EVs.
Yeah. And, some of it's just like not super sexy, but really important, right? Like, next generation energy efficient windows, right? So we have a tax credit for that. Now, right now, there are a lot of people who work 50, 60 hours. They come home, they pay to heat their home, and they think they're heating their home, but they're actually like heating the whole neighborhood because their windows are just leaking out energy. Now they can go buy this energy efficient window, retrofit their home. And by the way, the companies that are making it are places like Seaway Windows that have been in operation for 60 years. Now they're just putting new coating on the windows that make them more energy efficient. So it's good for American manufacturing and the workers, and it's good for your pocketbook. And you get to be part of meeting the moment in the decisive decade on climate.
And if someone is listening to this and they want, it's very good. Ali, I'm going to say it's very good. But if someone is listening to this and they say, but how do I get that tax credit? How do I get the help with buying my car? Where do I go to do that? What would you tell them that they should know?
Cleanenergy.gov, cleanenergy.gov. That's the place to go. There's a picture of a house. It's got all the appliances that you could possibly have. You click on which thing may be due for an upgrade, and it'll tell you how to get resources to help you do that. More affordable, more accessible, more sustainable, cleanenergy.gov.
That's great. And listen, I could clearly go on and on about this because I am truly thrilled that we are finally doing something to counter this climate emergency. But I realize that you are a busy man and you have other places to be. But I want to thank you so much for joining me today, Ali. I mean, obviously the elements in this bill, no matter how big they are just the first step in a long road to rescuing our climate. But anything that finally gets us on the right path is a major win. And we need to reimagine how we look at environmentalism and saving the planet, not just as a bunch of tree huggers who want to take your jobs and force you to take cold showers all the time and ruin your good time, but as an exciting, proactive, money-making, brighter future that we can all get behind. And I really think that this act sets us on that path. And I really want to thank you guys for having the foresight to meet the moment. And I hope we will meet you there.
Thank you. And I just appreciate the opportunity to talk about how, this bottom line to something that is about jobs and opportunity. It's a vindication of folks' optimism. Politics gets a bad rap. I think it's the space between policy ideas and people, right? It is the thing that, folks got out there, they organized, and they took these ideas that were on the shelf. And because of the politics being right, we were able to translate those ideas into real impact for people. Now we get to do that fun work, transform lives, create jobs, create infrastructure, strengthen America's economy, make it more resilient, make it more equitable. And I'm just thrilled to be part of that ecosystem.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. Thanks a lot, Ali.
Thanks.
I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that was National Climate Advisor Ali Zaidi, reminding us that this is the decisive decade for climate action. And not only can America lead the pack in new jobs and new industries, we can be a nation of innovators again. It's not about forcing change, but about seeing the moment and choosing it. Not just because it's the right thing to do, or quite frankly, the only thing to do, but because it can also be incredibly lucrative. A bill like the Infrastructure Reduction Act reminds us why choosing the right leaders with the right values is essential. That politics is, as Ali said, the space between policy and people. And by choosing what's best for our planet, we ultimately get what's best for us. I want to thank Ali for joining us today and you for caring enough about democracy to be here. Until next week, PGF. The Politics Girl podcast is written and performed by me, Lee McGowan, in partnership with the Midas Media Network, and produced and edited by Happy Warrior Entertainment. All rights reserved.